For our fourth panelist, let me now jump to Laos and Anan. Anan, you've heard what others have said. Laos is a smaller nation, very much so than Indonesia, or even Malaysia or Myanmar in terms of the size of the country. But very clearly, you and your organization are having an impact. Again, could you share? Let me ask you also to share a little bit about your group and some lessons learned that others from across Southeast Asia might be able to take from you. Anan.
Okay. สบายดี Thank you so much, Ambassador Chin and Dina and IRI colleagues and my fellow inspirational youth leaders in the region. Well, I'm the founder of Proud to Be Us Laos. Proud to Be Us Laos is a small initiative. It was a small initiative back in 2012 when we organized the first unofficial Pride, an LGBT Pride. And then it was a very new to the Lao PDR in that time because the LGBT issues is mostly interpreted as the Western import or Western ideology, but actually it's a human reality. So that was the time that we first defend this idea and explain this idea to our government and also development partners. It was very challenging time, but because of the fact, it's a fact. And then we explained it to our government and also to development partners and everybody that, okay, being LGBT is human reality. But first of all, thanks to the U.S. government, because in that time it was the U.S. Embassy was the co-organizer of this event. And then we turned the event to become the first LGBT rights non-profit association or civil society organization in Laos. And now we are working on three main objectives. For first, we want to eliminate stigma and discrimination in the education institutions like school and universities. And second, we advocate for the comprehensive sexual health services to the subgroups because LGBTI, the men and women, and not just men and women, but there are subgroups. And we want to make sure that they get equal health services. And I think our government has done a fantastic job to include us in the National Strategic Plan on HIV/AIDS prevention and also include us in the national law. And the last one is we promote the equal employment among LGBTI. So with these three topics, we work on political advocacy. So we don't go to villages or we don't go to places to give information, but we work with the policymakers known as government partners and embassies, United Nations agencies, and international development organizations by applying the international body to the national development framework. So we are more like an advocacy group, a political advocacy group. So I would like to share a few things that we have achieved in the last few years. So we were invited by the Lao Youth Union, equivalent to Ministry of Youth Affairs, but here we call it Lao Youth Union, to get involved in the drafting the National Policy on Youth Development 2019 to 2030. So this is the first time that the LGBTI representative to sit there with the government partners and raise our voice. But of course, in Laos, there is a specific context, which I will share in our lesson learned later. And also, we have recently published the first research on being LGBTI at work in collaboration with Faculty of Law and Political Science, National University of Laos. So this is the first thing that one of the first projects that we are very proud of, because who could imagine that we could convince the National University of Laos to talk about such issue. And now we are planning to push for legislation. We want to push for policy. So we are working on creating the diversity and inclusion in the workplace policy, and we try to encourage state enterprises and civil society organization and private sector to adopt such policy. But of course, it's not like we try to force them to adopt it, but we try to explain to them why diversity and inclusion matter in the workplace. So this is in the implementation process now. We are in the negotiation process with the National University. And recently, we have received the recommendations from the UN member states in the Universal Periodic Review, the UPR recommendations. We got recommendation from Malta and Iceland, urging the Lao government to come out with the protection policy of the LGBTI people. So I think it is something that will take time, but I think it's possible that such thing can happen in Laos, because we believe that in each country and each region, the strategy is different. And my 3 lessons learned that I would like to impart with fellow youth is that I think it's very difficult to change the world. The world is so big, and the world cannot be changed by a certain group of people, but it has to be changed with everybody together, right? But youth power matter. And I think that the most important thing is to get our community, our society, and our country to be updated with what's going on in the world. That is the role of youth leader to ensure that our society and our nation go with what's, in accordance to what is going on in the world. And also, I think strengthening relationship with the government is the key to sustainable development goal. I think I like to give an example to my community that even your parents, it took several years for them to accept you. What about the government? They're not your parents. They are government, right? They're in politics and stuff. So I think that with patience and strategy and understanding of the country context is the way to move things forward. For example, from our lesson learned, Proud to Be Us Laos, we really speak with government a lot. Sometimes we get some friendly response, sometimes silence, But we understand them like, okay, this is something that Lao PDR has never talked about. So I use a lot of patience and understanding and build common understanding, like understanding how they feel, and also at the same time explaining to them how we feel, and use the international evidence on what we are doing to solve the problem or the myth or the misunderstanding. And the last lesson learned that I would like to share is that democracy and human rights are working differently in each country, depending on the geopolitical factors, historical factors, and also the governance system as well. And if you know about Lao PDR, you will see that we are very similar to Vietnam and even China as well. So I think that again, like the first speaker says, that we share similarities in every state, but at the same time we also have a little bit of differences and similarities. But I believe that the youth power is the same. It's all the same because we are in the generation to make the difference. It starts with our generation and the next generation as well. And lastly, I think democracy and human rights will work on its own once the civil society, the community understand what is going on in the world and what we are doing, because I believe that we are one of the most fortunate leaders here, speaking with Ambassador Shin and Dina and IRI colleagues, but there are so many people that don't even know what we are talking here. So I think that our role is to educate those who are not fortunate to understand what is going on, and then the development will come after. Thank you.
No, thank you so much. I mean, you, like the others, are a great example of what is happening in the region. And also, I would note that in terms of your approach, you actually created an organization. So as we think about, each of you brings such unique perspectives, from work with the media to being part of government to being at a think tank, sharing that information, knowledge to members of government, actually going and creating an organization.